A reed boat pushed out from the shore of an island that had just been made. The bundle inside it has been wrapped with some care. It holds a newborn with no bones. The first result produced by the two gods who were sent down to build the world. They were not punished. They were not tricked. They ran the procedure exactly as given. Except the wrong one of them spoke first. That is the entire error. One step out of order, and the world fails to build. Japan's oldest book does not open with a creator who speaks and is obeyed. It opens with a bug report. Most creation stories are stories of design. A god speaks, and the universe is built to specification. The Kojiki, written 1,300 years ago, is not that. It reads like a system startup, and the one you just watched is the attempt that failed. First, 5 deities appeared in the void, which looked like a swirling vortex of oil. Think of them as the cosmic engineers who wrote the source code for this world. A quick word of advice before we go further. Don't try to memorize their names. Most Japanese people don't know them either, and this won't be on the test. The team leader, for the record, was called Ame no Minakanushi no Kami. However, their names are not meaningless incantations. If we unpack the name, it has a clear structure. The name itself indicates the role of the entity. In modern terms, it looks like this. This is where the myth gets weirdest and most interesting. Once they finished setting up the laws of physics, they did something a Western god would never dream of. They logged out. The text says they hid themselves. Immediately after booting the universe, some of them exited the story forever, while the rest stayed off stage, moving into support roles in the background. They left the world unfinished, a drifting, chaotic state, like a primordial soup. What this universe needed was not an omnipotent ruler sitting in a chair, but field operators willing to get their hands dirty in the mud. 7 generations of abstract deities appeared, and at the very end of this sequence, our protagonists, Izanagi and Izanami, finally take the stage. They were handed a jeweled spear and given a mission that was essentially a total handoff. Go down there and do something about this chaos. And as we're about to see, their first attempt at environment setup did not exactly go according to plan. Now the cosmic system has started, but there is still no physical entity, no hardware, only a soup of uncertain data drifting like jellyfish. That's when Izanagi and Izanami appear. Here, a key term for decoding Japanese mythology appears: koto yosashi. It means entrusting a matter through words. In system terms, it is the full delegation of authority. The high gods handed them a physical root access, a jeweled spear, and commanded them to configure, solidify, and bring form to this drifting world. In plain terms, it was a total handoff. But this wasn't mere irresponsibility. It was a ritual of divine trust, full authority entrusted to those who would shape the world. The floating bridge of heaven was not yet a true connection, but a platform suspended between heaven and earth, a place from which creation would begin. The two thrust the spear they received into the murky sea below, churning the shio, the brine, with the sound koro, koro. To a foreign ear, koro might sound like a strange way to describe stirring liquid. But even to modern Japanese people, this is a very mysterious expression. According to scholars of ancient Japanese, koro is not the sound of violent splashing. Phonetically, it represents a clear, gentle motion, that gradually gains momentum as raw matter begins to crystallize. Furthermore, some prominent scholars suggest it was more than just a sound. They believe it was a magical incantation, a spell chanted by the deities to invoke Kotodama, the spirit of words, to bind the chaotic universe into solid form. Through this resonance, raw matter, once drifting without form, is given order by the rotation of the spear, converging into a single mass. Scattered particles bind together and finally take on tangible form. When the spear was withdrawn, the brine dripping from its tip solidified and an island was born, Onogoro-shima. It was the first tangible foundation in the universe, the very first hardware layer. For the first time, solid ground emerged from a world that had not yet taken stable form. This tiny island became the base layer upon which the rest of the world would be built. Finally, the two deities descend from the floating bridge and step onto the first land they have brought into being. Having descended to the reality of Onogoro Island, their first action was to build a starting point for creation. A massive stone pillar, Ameno Mihashira, and a grand hall, Yahiro-dono, which would serve as the foundation for their communication. Inside the newly built hall, we are faced with the most vital concept of this mythology. It is that the gods themselves are in the middle of a process called becoming. They are not perfected creators. As the universe shaped itself, some appeared as centers and others as energy. And Izanagi and Izanami became a non-symmetrical pair that complements each other. According to the Kojiki, they confirmed their interfaces like this. In my body, there is a part that remains incomplete. My body has a part in excess. What if we unite our imperfections and give birth to the land? In the Kojiki, they do not describe their bodies as defective or broken, but rather as insufficiently formed and excessively formed. They realized that their physical asymmetry was not an error, but an intended specification, a plug and a port, designed to connect and build the world together. Now ready for connection, the specific process of becoming begins. In the narrative, this is depicted as the first marriage ritual in Japanese mythology. But from a system perspective, marriage is precisely the physical synchronization that allows two different processes to integrate and generate something new. The rule was simple. Walk around the massive pillar and exchange words when they meet perfectly face to face, completing the handshake. But here, still in the process of becoming, they triggered a fatal error. The moment they met, Izanami was overcome with emotion and spoke first.
Oh, what a fine man!
Then Izanagi replied, Ah, what a beautiful maiden. The ritual was complete, and the time for generation had come. But what was born was a boneless, incomplete child named Hiruko, and the next, Awashima, was also not counted among their offspring.
They placed Hiruko in a reed boat and cast him out to sea.
Why did it fail? Among the countless processes provided by the system for becoming, they had unknowingly violated an absolute rule of the system. The generation process failed, and the creation of the land proved unsuccessful. They would learn firsthand, not even gods can defy the absolute rules of the system. Having failed in their first creation, producing only incomplete results, they did not stop in despair, but immediately moved to resolve the situation. They headed for the realm far above, Takamagahara, the high plane of heaven. There, the original deities, the ones who had moved to support roles in the background, were waiting.
Upon receiving the report, the original deities performed a divination. They burned a deer's shoulder blade and read the cracks to find the cause of the system error. In modern terms, log analysis using a diagnostic tool. Reading the pattern of the cracks, the original deities quickly identified the cause. The Kojiki records the result of this divination. It was because Izanagi, who was the receiver, spoke first. Translated into system language, it was a violation of the execution sequence. A slight discrepancy in procedure had caused a fatal internal conflict. The original deities gave the two the correct sequence. The order of speech in the ritual was reversed. Go back down and try again. Having received the correct sequence, the two descended once more to Onogoro Island. This time, Izanagi spoke first, and Izanami responded. Connection established in the correct sequence. Once the correct code was running, the speed was phenomenal. Awaji, Shikoku, Kyushu, and finally, Honshu. Once the mechanism was established, physical entities were generated one after another, like a sweeping chain reaction. In the Kojiki, this is called the birth of Oyashima no Kuni, the land of the 8 great islands. It was the moment Onogoro Island, once a mere prototype, was scaled up into a magnificent architecture named Japan. The unfinished universe had evolved into a giant system running in perfect harmony. Or so it seemed. But towards the end of the scheduled generation process, a certain entity was about to be called. The next thing to be born was the god of fire, possessing destructive thermal energy. And Izanami, though a deity, would lose her life simply by being burned by this fire. The sudden death of the beloved partner. And Izanagi, in despair, steps into the quarantined sector that must never be accessed. Yomi no Kuni, the land of the dead. The most beautiful and terrifying story of loss and reboot in the history of Japanese mythology is about to begin. Finally, let's analyze the metadata hidden within this epic system. Hiruko, the incomplete data cast out to sea. In truth, the description in the Kojiki stops right after he is cast away. He is, so to speak, deleted from the main story. However, the people who lived within this mythology did not leave him that way. Along Japan's coasts, there exists a unique faith in yorigami, drifting gods. It is the belief that objects washed ashore are divine entities that bring blessings. This image of sacred drifting objects merged with the story of Hiruko. The discarded child survived the rough waves, was redefined by the logic of the external environment, and was given a new role as Ebisu, the god of the sea who brings fortune. The prayers of the people elevated an error discarded by the official history into a supreme god of fortune. This flexible framework may be the biggest reason why the system known as Japanese mythology has remained active for over 1,000 years. The world that two imperfect gods had forged, through trial and error, patch after patch, suddenly collapsed. A catastrophic thermal runaway triggered by the birth of the fire deity, Kagutsuchi. With the death of his co-creator Izanami, the system logged its first irrecoverable error since the dawn of existence. Having lost his partner, Izanagi cuts down the source of this heat. In any other mythology, this would be framed as a grim tragedy of kinship, a fateful clash between creator and creation. But this agonizing strike was more than vengeance born from grief. It was also an act of creative destruction, cleaving the raw, uncontrollable energy of fire and bringing forth 8 new deities. The massive heat source that was cleaved apart did not simply disappear. The single runaway process, fire, was subdivided by the sword into 8 contained modules, then mapped onto the existing terrain, the rocks, mountains, and valleys already in place. It was the moment when individual management processes, godhood itself, were assigned to what had previously been nothing more than raw physical objects. By absorbing this immense thermal energy as a will embedded in nature, the world upgraded its own environmental system. And from the blood dripping off the administrator's sword, powerful independent programs were deployed, chief among them the supreme thunder god Takemikazuchi, who would one day pacify the entire world. Through this single tragedy, the ancient chroniclers documented a masterclass in resource management, converting runaway energy into raw materials for nature's expansion and firewalls to defend the system. Having lost his beloved Izanagi descends into the quarantined sector reserved for the dead, Yomi, the underworld.
You are too late. I have already eaten the food of this realm. I can no longer return.
Yet, moved by Izanagi's desperate pleas, she relents.
Even so, I will try to negotiate with the gods of Yomi. But while I do, you must not look inside, under any circumstances.
Do not look. Of course he looked. Breaking a tooth from his comb to light the dark. What the firelight revealed was not the woman he loved, but a body consumed by decay, crawling with thunder and rot. That one forbidden gaze would tear the two gods apart, forever. Why does breaking the forbidden look trigger such a catastrophic error? This taboo is etched across mythologies worldwide, from the Greek tale of Orpheus onward. This is not just a recurring plot device, it was a universal specification, a rule designed to prevent system corruption by enforcing the absolute separation of two contradictory datasets, life and death. Not even an administrator with root access could override the immutable laws of the realm of the dead. At the climax of this desperate chase, Izanagi commanded the peaches that saved him to protect the people of the terrestrial world as well. But pause for a moment. Up to this point in the story, there has not been a single mention of the gods ever designing or creating humans. Unlike Western mythology, where God deliberately coded humans in his own image, the humans in the Kojiki simply appear. They are detected in this scene's logs as mysterious active users who had somehow spawned within the system, with no creator on record. A boundary sealed shut by a 1,000-ton boulder. This was the definitive logical partition between the living and the dead, a firewall erected to protect the entire system. And here, Standing on opposite sides of that wall, they exchange their final words.
My beloved husband, if this is what you would do to me, then each day I shall extinguish 1,000 lives in your world.
My beloved wife, then I shall raise 1,500 birthing halls each day and bring forth new life. 1,000 deletions against 1,500 deployments, a net gain of plus 500 every single day. This is the origin of the human lifespan, the mythological reason we are born and the reason we die. In the face of an eternal deletion threat, a population life cycle management protocol was established, ensuring the system could keep growing without ever collapsing. Stained by the corruption of death, Izanagi needed to purify himself. And when he steps into those waters and washes everything away, the story will plunge into its true beginning, the birth of the three most exalted deities, Amaterasu, Tsukuyomi, and Susanoo.
Let's rewind for a moment. What saved Izanagi from certain death was not a divine blade or sorcery, but a simple peach. So, why a peach? This remarkably powerful warding specification was, in fact, heavily influenced by an external library, the Continental OS known as Taoism. In Taoism, the peach was a sacred fruit, one that granted immortality and repelled evil. The Kojiki was never a closed system. It ran on a flexible, open architecture, one fully capable of importing useful external modules. But not every piece of logic in this system was necessarily a foreign import. Some of it may simply be the result of standard design patterns, solutions independently developed across civilizations to address the same fundamental problems, naturally converging here as well. A citation of foreign code, or convergence on a universal truth? This source code, called the Kojiki, continues to run in silence, harboring a question for which no definitive answer exists. Izanagi barely escaped the realm of the dead, but the corruption of Yomi, its malware, has deeply permeated his being. Here, at the sacred estuary of Awagihara, where the river meets the sea, he begins the ritual of misogi, a full system purge. First, he cast off his garments and ornaments one by one, and from each discarded item, new deities were born. From his staff, a god of paths. From his sash, a god of roads. Simply by unequipping his gear, 12 deities were deployed. Here again, a pattern from the previous episode emerges, the same one seen in the decomposition of Kagutsuchi. Rather than simply deleting contaminated data, the system recycles resources during the process, repurposing them as new components. This mythology consistently describes a recycling-based resource management, one that extracts value even from waste. Having cast everything aside, Izanagi stepped into the water and began the full purge. The first impurities to wash away spawned two deities of calamity. But immediately after, as if to neutralize the threat, three deities of purification were automatically generated. When malware was purged from the system, corresponding security modules were automatically deployed. The system was designed with self-healing architecture, generating countermeasures the moment a threat was detected. The purification process, having spawned countless deities as byproducts, finally reached its core. When Izanagi washed his face for the last time,
From his left eye emerged Amaterasu, the solar sovereign who illuminates all of heaven. From his right eye, Tsukuyomi, the silent guardian of the night. And from his nose, Susanoo, the untamed storm, wreathed in chaos. Izanagi was overjoyed. Of all the children he had brought forth, he declared, "At last, I have gained 3 most precious ones." And immediately he delegated dominion to each. To Amaterasu, the high plane of heaven, to Tsukuyomi, the realm of night, and to Susanoo, the sea. Partitioning the world into 3 independent sectors, each governed by a core process with supreme authority. This act of formal delegation has a name, Kotoyosashi. The same protocol, but a new phase. No longer to create the world, but to govern it. A superior assigns. A process accepts. A domain is governed. But a fatal error was embedded within the 3rd core process. Susanoo refused to execute his Kotoyosashi, the sea he had been formally assigned to govern. Even after being entrusted with the great duty of ruling the seas, he did nothing but wail. "I want to go to where my dead mother rests," he cried. His grief was not mere weeping. Green mountains withered in an instant. Vast oceans dried up. Calamities consumed the world. A rogue process that refused its assigned task, consuming infinite resources with an endless loop of grief. That is what Susanoo had become to the system. Izanagi delivered his final verdict. "Your endless weeping is destroying this land. You are no longer permitted to dwell here." Banishment, a forced ejection from the system. And with this decree, Izanagi, the father who forged the world, exits the main narrative entirely. Accepting his exile, Susanoo declared he would first bid farewell to his sister and ascended toward the high plane of heaven. But as he rose, every mountain and river trembled, and the entire earth groaned beneath him. Sensing the disturbance, Amaterasu made her judgment. "My brother does not come with good intentions. He comes to seize my domain." She unbound her hair, retied it for battle, armed herself with bow and arrows, and braced for war. At the gate of Takamagahara, Susanoo faced the armed administrator.
You are wrong. I only wished to bid you farewell before I descend to the root country. I have no hostile intent.
Amaterasu kept her bow drawn and answered quietly.
Then prove it.
And so the two agreed to execute a verification by uke. Uke is an ancient verification protocol, a declaration made in advance with the outcome of the ritual serving as divine judgment. Normally, the winning condition should have been agreed upon before execution. In this case, that step was skipped. The two exchanged their sacred objects. Amaterasu received Susanoo's sword. Susanoo received Amaterasu's magatama, the sacred curved jewel. Each shattered the other's artifact and breathed forth the mist. From Susanoo's sword, 3 gentle goddesses, luminous and calm. From Amaterasu's jewels, 5 powerful male deities, one by one. Gentle goddesses were born from my sword. This proves my heart is pure. Susanoo declared victory. The result was interpreted by Susanoo and accepted by the Supreme Administrator. Worth noting, however, the uke produced more than a verdict. The three goddesses born from Susanoo's sword became Amaterasu's divine retinue, woven into the lineage of the high plane of heaven. The male god born from Amaterasu's jewel would become the ancestor of the imperial line. As a byproduct of a verification ritual, divine succession itself had been initialized.
But the innocence he had proven only emboldened Susanoo further. He went on a rampage across the high plane of heaven, destroying rice paddies, filling irrigation ditches, and defiling sacred halls. Yet Amaterasu chose to defend him, even now. Faced with an unmistakable act of malicious attack, sacred grounds defiled with excrement, she issued a public statement. He must have been drunk. There was no malice in it. This was not mere indulgence. It was a deliberate reclassification, a malicious attack rewritten as a system error. A desperate maneuver by the Supreme Administrator to avoid banishing her brother, to keep the system's order intact. And then the irreversible. Susanoo hurled a flayed horse through the roof of the sacred weaving hall. The impact claimed the life of a weaving goddess, struck down by the tools of her own craft. She had defended him, endured him, tried to believe. In that moment, the thread snapped. Enough. No more. The administrator made her decision. Total abdication. Faced with the uncontrollable bug known as Susanoo, the Supreme Administrator chose to shut herself down. She retreated into the depths of the heavenly rock cave, Ama-no-Iwato, and sealed herself inside. Without the sun's administrator, both heaven and earth were plunged into absolute darkness. In modern terms, this was hikikomori, a total retreat from the world. Let's return to Izanagi's misogi. In Japanese, there is an expression, mizu ni nagasu, to let the water wash it away. To release past wrongs, unspoken. Its origin traces back to this very scene. The idea of water as purification is universal. Christian baptism, Hindu bathing in the Ganges, the Jewish mikveh. Across cultures, humanity has found the same power in water. So what makes the Japanese concept distinct? Most traditions require a procedure, confession, atonement, explicit forgiveness. But Mizu ni Nagasu requires none. This worldview is called kegare and harai. Kegare, not sin, but a state, contamination that simply accumulates. Harai, not forgiveness, but a reset, no judgment, no intermediary. And the protocol still runs. The ritual hand-washing, temizu, at every shrine. The twice-yearly o-hare ceremony. Code from 1300 years ago, still quietly executing. The instinct to wash things away may be universal, but what gets washed and how differs fundamentally between systems, and those differences are still quietly encoded today. At Susanoo's rampage, Amaterasu's anger turned quiet and deep. The Supreme Administrator of the high plane of heaven abandoned her duties and chose to hide herself from the world entirely. She withdrew into Ama-no-Iwato, the heavenly rock cave, and sealed its heavy door from within. No cries of rage,
No screams, only a deep silence remained. In that moment, all light vanished from the high plane of heaven. And at the very same instant, the earth below, Ashihara no Nakatsukuni, was swallowed by complete darkness. Worth noting, the Kojiki's original text never directly calls Amaterasu a sun goddess. Only her name and what just happened make it clear. And there is something more. The fact that both realms fell dark in the same instant reveals a deeper structure. Two worlds sharing a single light source. And it suggests Earth was subordinate to heaven. A dependency exposed only by the administrator's absence. The administrator's absence began to corrode the world at once. Every malevolent spirit took advantage of the darkness, their voices swarming like summer flies, filling every corner of creation. Disasters multiplied. The whole system was collapsing in a chain reaction. With the core administrator down, the world itself was sliding toward total ruin. At this rate, the world itself would cease to exist. The Yaoyorozu no Kami, the myriad gods, were summoned in emergency assembly. The meeting place? Ama no Yasu no Kawara, the bank of the sacred river that flows through the high plane of heaven. In this crisis, one god stepped forward. His name was Omoikane, the god of wisdom and counsel. The other gods entrusted him with the design of the solution. And his conclusion was something no one had expected. Omoikane's plan was complex, precise, strange. It began with the preparation of the devices. First, long crowing birds were summoned from Tokoyo, the eternal land beyond the sea. The image of a rooster crowing at dawn is one shared by nearly every culture on Earth. And the gods made it crow, the activation of a boot signal announcing to the world that dawn had come. Next, the casting of the sacred treasures began. Under the direction of the smith gods, a single mirror was cast. Its name, Yata no Kagami, the sacred mirror. A historical note. Outside the myth, in ancient Japan, a mirror was no ordinary object. To cast one required national-scale technology and resources. And it is this kind of artifact that the myth places at the center of the ritual. Next, the jewel-maker god crafted a string of 500 curved jewels, Yasakani no Magatama. A whole sacred sakaki tree was uprooted from Mount Amano-Kagu and brought to the assembly ground. On its upper branches, the gods hung the Magatama. On its middle branches, the mirror. On its lower branches, the white and blue offerings of cloth. And so, the central apparatus of the ritual was complete. With every device positioned, the priest of the gods stepped forward. Before the rock cave, he intoned the Futo no Rito, the formal prayer of the gods, a ritual boot command, the sacred opening declaration. The ceremony had begun. But the Norito was only the first move. And now, the strongest god took his position. Ame no Tajikarao, the god with the mightiest arms among the gods. He concealed himself just beside the rock door, holding his breath. The stage was set, and surely anyone watching would have thought, here it comes, they will tear the door open by force. But what began next was a dance. Ame no Uzume leapt atop an overturned tub before the rock cave and began to dance with wild abandon. In a trance, she loosened her garments and her dance grew bold. She forgot the gods before her, forgot herself entirely.
and broke past all restraint. And when the myriad gods saw it, they erupted in laughter. A roar of laughter so great that the high plane of heaven itself trembled. This dance, in time, would come to be remembered as the oldest comedic burlesque in Japanese myth. And that laughter reached Amaterasu, hidden inside the cave. And she wondered, I have withdrawn, and the world should be drowning in darkness. Why then are they laughing so joyfully out there? Curiosity, an irresistible question, stirred in the heart of the Supreme Administrator, and she opened the rock door, just a crack, from the inside. Then, through the gap, she called out, "What is happening?" It was Ame-no-Uzume who answered, "There is a goddess here more august than you. That is why we are laughing." At those very words, the priests of the gods held the mirror up to the crack in the door. And what Amaterasu saw peering out was a goddess of radiant light. Not the wavering image of water, but a sharp, living likeness. She had never seen a mirror before. She was shaken. Has another sun goddess appeared to take my place? What she saw was her own reflection, and she opened the door a little wider to look more closely. In that very instant, Ame-no Tajikarao seized her arm and pulled her outside. A priest stretched the shimenawa, a sacred straw rope, sealing the cave behind her. Beyond this rope, you may never return. And so, the Supreme Administrator was restored to the world. And here, we must look back and see what truly happened. The gods did not break the door. They did not force it open. They did not beg for her to come out. Amaterasu opened the door herself. What Omoikane had designed was a situation in which the target wanted to come out. A precision instrument aimed at the most subtle vulnerability of all, curiosity. This was not a Force reboot. This was a social engineering exploit. A vulnerability exploited not by violence, but by wisdom. The moment Amaterasu emerged, light returned to the world. The darkness that had veiled both the high plane of heaven and the earth below was driven back, swept away by the radiance of the sun. The gods rejoiced. Creation itself broke into celebration. System reboot complete. The administrator had returned to her throne. And then, judgment was passed. Upon Susanoo, the cause of all this, the myriad gods imposed a severe punishment. The Kojiki records. They cut his beard and extracted the nails of his hands and feet. And he was banished forever from the high plane of heaven. Account ban. From the realm of the Supreme Administrator, he was wholly removed. And so this tale comes to its close. But something it left behind still reaches us today. The two artifacts forged in this episode, Yata no Kagami and Yasakani no Magatama, became two of Japan's 3 sacred treasures. For more than 1,000 years, they have served as proof of imperial succession itself. Today, the mirror is enshrined at Ise, the Magatama within the imperial palace. But are the contents truly the artifacts of the gods? Honestly, no one knows. By tradition, the boxes have never been opened.
not even by the emperor himself. And yet, whether the contents are real does not matter. What matters is the consensus that something too sacred to be seen is truly there. That shared belief, unbroken for 1,300 years, is the artifact itself. And it is still online. And one more thing. The wild dance Ame no Uzume performed, the dance that brought the myriad gods to laughter, is considered the origin of Kagura, the sacred Shinto dance still performed at shrines across Japan today. The spirit of that one dance before the rock cave still echoes. The third sacred treasure, the sword Kusanagi no Tsurugi, will reveal itself in a story yet to come. Before the hero, there was the exile. Cast out of heaven, a god walks the earth alone, hungry and far from anyone who still remembers his name. He comes upon a goddess and asks her for food. She gives gladly and begins to lay out a feast, rich and endless. Then he sees how she is making it. The food she is offering him, she is drawing it out of her nose, her mouth, her backside. He recoils. Filth, defilement. This is what she means to feed him? And the exile does what he always does with the things that disgust him, without once stopping to understand. He draws his blade and cuts her down. But here is the first strange law of this world, the law this whole story turns on. From the body of the thing he destroyed, life pours out. From her head, silkworms. From her eyes, rice. From her ears, millet. From her nose, red beans. From her loins, wheat. And from her rear, soybeans. And from the shadows, a god stirs. One of the very first, who hid away at the dawn of the world and has not been seen since. Quietly, that god gathers the grain, the first seeds. The goddess he cut down as garbage was the seed of every harvest that would ever feed his people. He just couldn't see it yet. He was no hero. Not yet. The exile keeps walking. Down out of the high country, into the land of Izumo, to the banks of the Hi River. A god with the blood of heaven's rulers in him, and nowhere left to belong. Then, something on the water. A single chopstick drifting down the current. Someone lives upstream. And the god turns and follows the river up toward people. But wait, that chopstick. A single chopstick drifting down to him at just the right moment? It sounds like exactly what it is, a convenient little piece of storytelling. Except, in old Japan, a chopstick in a river was no accident at all. Even today, Japanese chopsticks are personal. In most homes, everyone has their own pair, their own rice bowl, and hardly anyone remembers why. It is simply how things are done. But the root runs deep. Anything your mouth had touched was believed to hold your ki, your spirit. A used chopstick was not merely dirty, it carried a trace of the person. So when a guest had eaten, their chopsticks were given to the river to carry that lingering spirit away and leave nothing behind. So that single chopstick on the current isn't a storyteller's convenience at all. It's a detail the ancient listeners would have found perfectly natural, a small, true thing, hiding in plain sight. He finds them by the water, an old man, an old woman,
and between them a young woman the two of them will not let go of. All three are weeping. He asks them why, and the old man tells him, "Every year a thing comes down out of the hills. They once had 8 daughters. 7 years, 7 daughters, taken one by one. The girl between them is the last, and it is almost time again." He asks what the thing is, and the answer is the kind of thing that doesn't sound real until you have seen it. Its eyes are red as open wounds. Its body stretches across 8 valleys and 8 peaks, moss and cypress growing along its back, like a mountain that learned to crawl. Its belly is raw and festering, red. And it has 8 heads, 8 tails. They call it Yamata-no-Orochi, a threat that returns on a schedule that no one has ever found a way to stop. Old, entrenched, recurring. The kind of thing that, in any system, you stop calling a monster and start calling legacy. Susanoo looks at the last daughter, and he makes them an offer. "Give her to me as my wife, and I will slay the thing that has been eating your children." The old man falters. "Forgive me, but I do not even know your name." And the exile names himself. "I am the younger brother of Amaterasu, the goddess who rules the heavens. I have come down from there." At that, the old man bows low and agrees. And then the god does something strange. He takes the girl, Kushinada, and he changes her into a comb. A small, sacred comb, which he sets into his own hair. It looks like he is simply hiding her. He is doing more than that. Her grandfather is the god of the mountains, and worn close, the mountain god's power shields the one who carries her. He guards her, she guards him. Now she is his treasure and his armor. Then he turns to the parents and starts giving orders. "Brew sake, the strongest you have ever made. Brew it and refine it and brew it again until it is something no living thing could drink and stay standing. Build a fence. Cut 8 gates into it. Behind each gate, a stand. On each stand, a barrel filled to the brim. 8 gates, 8 barrels, 1 for every head." The old couple don't understand, not yet, but the storm god has stopped raging and started designing. Night comes to Izumo, and the hills begin to move. It comes the way a flood comes, not fast, but unstoppable, filling the valley, until the river itself seems to rise up on 8 necks and turn to look at them. Then it smells the sake. 8 heads find 8 gates, 8 mouths sink into 8 barrels. And the thing that has terrorized this land for so long begins, greedily, to drink. It drinks the strongest sake ever made, and slowly, head by head, the great body grows heavy, the red eyes dim, the necks sink down, and the monster that fed on this family year after year is undone by the one thing it could not stop itself from swallowing. It sleeps. And now, the hero process runs. The sword he once carried is gone, given up in the oath with his sister, broken into 3 goddesses. The blade in his hand now is another, rough, weathered, a thing of the earth. Susanoo grips it and steps into the dark among the barrels. What follows is not a battle. The thing never wakes. One head at a time, he cuts them from the sleeping serpent. One by one, the necks fall. The river He turns red and carries the ruin of it down toward the sea. He does not stop at the heads. He cuts the great body apart, coil by coil, until only the tails remain. He brings the blade down on the last of them, and it stops dead. Something inside the tail turns his edge. He strikes again, and the blade that had just cut through the serpent chips, cracks, and breaks. He cuts the tail open, and there, buried in the flesh of the very thing he came to destroy, something is shining. A sword. Straight, flawless, glowing faintly, as if a piece of heaven had been sleeping inside the serpent all along. In time, the world will call it Kusanagi, the most storied blade in all of Japan. The storm has passed. The most destructive god in all of these stories now holds a blade beyond any other, and it is not his to keep. What he does with it, no one will expect. He will send this divine sword up to the very sister who cast him out. And the god who tore 8 heads from a monster is about to sit down and write Japan's very first poem. But that is the next protocol. One more thing, for anyone who likes to know what a myth is really made of. Why a serpent? Why a river valley? Why a sword, of all things, in the tail? For centuries, people have read this as far more than a monster story. Izumo was iron country. Its rivers ran red with iron sand, and from that iron came blades. A river that floods and has to be tamed before rice can grow. A maiden whose very name means rice paddy. Read it this way, and the serpent becomes a wild river, and the sword, the iron the land gives up once that river is mastered. Slay the flood, and the valley is safe. Win the river, and you win its iron. The myth may be remembering something real. The day a people learned to master the water and the metal of their land. And it remembers it the way the Kojiki always does. Not as engineering, but as a god who cut a monster open and found heaven inside. And there is a deeper reading still. And a modern writer, himself a descendant of Japan's old imperial line, takes it further. The river that drowns the valley is the very same river that feeds it. It gives with one hand and takes with the other. So it is not so much that the serpent held the sword, he suggests. It is that the sword was what the serpent truly was. A sacred thing, lost beneath a skin of filth and rage. He points to a film you may know, Spirited Away. The shape is the same. The reeking stink spirit that turns out to be a river god, fouled by all the filth humans dumped in his waters. Pull the filth out of him, and the true god rises free. Strip the corruption from the monster, and the prize was there all along. The monster did not guard the treasure. The monster was the treasure. Of course, that is only one reading. But how much coincidence can a single story hold? And the sword itself? Last episode, the gods forged a mirror and a string of jewels, 2 of the 3 sacred treasures of Japan. We said the third would come later. This is the third. Kusanagi, once named Ame-no-Murakumo, the sword of the gathering heavenly clouds. It will pass to the sun goddess and down through the line of her descendants. And it is said to rest, even now, in a shrine at Atsuta. A mirror, a jewel, and a sword pulled from the body of a monster, carried still to this day.
The storm god who tore heaven apart has just sent his sister a gift. High above the earth, in the high plane of heaven, a messenger comes before Amaterasu, sent up from the world below. And in the messenger's hands, a sword. Not just any sword, the blade her brother pulled from the tail of a monster, the finest ever found in this world. He has sent it up to her, the exile, to the very goddess who banished him. Remember how they parted, his rampage through her halls, the terror that drove her behind the cave door and left the whole world in darkness. For that, the gods drove him from heaven, and she let him go. And now, that same brother sends her this, not a weapon turned against her, an offering. The one who brought her nothing but ruin, sending up the greatest treasure his hands have ever held. She takes it. She says nothing. But the gulf she set between them, the day she turned her back, at last, quietly, closes. The one she sent away has reached back, and the goddess accepts it. The sword rose to heaven. The god who sent it did not. Down on the earth, Susanoo and Kushinada, the girl he saved, now his wife, set out across Izumo to find a place to settle, somewhere to stop and stay. For a god who has never belonged anywhere, expelled from heaven, a wanderer with nowhere to put down roots, this is something new. He is not hunting a throne or a battlefield. He is looking for a place to live. And he finds it. He comes to a stretch of land and stops and looks around him. And he says, "Coming here to this place, my heart is sugasugashi." Clear, calm, clean. It may be the first peace this god has ever felt. And so he names the place for that feeling, Suga, which is more or less a pun. One reading has it that the place was already called Suga, and the storyteller simply invented a reason for the name. Why Suga? Because the god said Sugasugashi. A dad joke, really, and Japan's oldest book is full of them. But there is a quiet charm in it, and the storm god of all gods, having finally found a little peace, names his new home after a good mood. And it's stuck. 13 centuries on, that corner of Izumo is still called Suga to this day. And here, the storm god will build his home. The walls of the new palace rise at Suga. And as they do, clouds rise up from the very ground. And the god who tore 8 heads from a monster sits down and does something no one in all of these stories has done before. He gives no command. He calls down no curse. He speaks a poem. The first poem in all of Japan.
役も立つ、出雲八重垣。妻込みに、八重垣作る。その、八重垣を。
And look at its shape. You almost certainly know its most famous descendant, the haiku, 5, 7, 5. This is the older, fuller form the haiku grew out of, 5, 7, 5, and then 7 and 7 again. 31 beats, locked in place. The form has a name of its own, tanka, a shape so exact it is almost a kind of code, the first fixed format this world ever wrote down. The eightfold clouds rise, in Izumo, eightfold fences. To keep my wife within, I raise eightfold fences. Oh, those eightfold fences. And the poem's very first words, "The eightfold clouds rise," would cling to this land for good. For centuries after, in Japanese verse, those words became a name for Izumo itself. And here is the strange thing. That shape never died. Every haiku you have ever seen is its grandchild. And the full form itself is still written today, 1,300 years on, beat for beat, unbroken. And of everything he might have said, with the first poem ever made, what did the most destructive god in all these tales choose? Not war, not vengeance, not the storm. He sang of a wall, built up layer upon layer, to keep one person safe inside. The god who began as nothing but wreckage ended his story building a home. And in time, Susanoo and Kushinada have a child. The bargain he once struck, a wife in exchange for a monster's head, becomes something neither of them could have planned. A bloodline. It runs on, quietly, generation after generation. The names in between don't matter here, only where the line leads. 6 generations down, 6 versions on, it arrives at the god at the center of everything that comes next. Okuninushi, the great land master. And with him, the ground itself shifts. The age of the gods of heaven is giving way to the gods of the earth. And the next story does not begin with thunder, or a sword, or a god of any great name. It begins on a quiet shore. There, at the edge of the sea, a small white rabbit is weeping, its fur stripped away, alone. This is where the age of Okuninushi begins, the great landmaster, and the whole story of the earthly gods opens here, with one small, crying creature. Season 1, The Age of the Gods, is complete. Season 2, The Age of the Earthly Gods, is now in production. The protocol still runs.